I'm Mike Cannici, and welcome to another edition of Valley Sports Rewind. And today we have a very special guest, and I'm really excited about this. He's a good friend of mine, and he's a longtime supporter of Ansonia Athletics, and as well as a great player for the Ansonia Chargers back in the 81, 82, and 83 season. We're here with longtime running back and coach for Ansonia, number 45, Earl Stanley. And Earl, thank you for coming on today.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I'm glad you said we're close friends.
I know, sometimes you never know, right? Yeah. Earl, we're going to talk a lot today about the 1983 Ansonia team. Just a little background on that team. They were the first team in Ansonia to finish number one in the state. Now, Ansonia, I believe, has 5 number one rankings in their history, but it wasn't until this 83 team where Ansonia finally got over that hump of being number one. It was a very special team. You had some great players on that team, players such as Glennie Antrim, Johnny Lawler, Tim Ahern. Of course, Earl Stanley. You know, you had a ton of guys on that team, and of course, they were coached by a longtime legendary Ansonia coach, Billy McAllister. But Earl, let me ask you this. Where did your journey with Ansonia football begin? How old were you, would you say?
Probably I was around 2 years old. 3 years old. My dad used to take me to all the Ansonia, not only football games, but a lot of their basketball games as well. And the football games, those fans are just as crazy today as they were back there in the 60s.
Right. You know, what's interesting, too, is as you were growing up in Ansonia, it's really about that time they started to really start winning. They had some rough years in the beginning of McAllister's 10 years coach, and they really turned it around, I want to say, 1972, 73. So, I mean, you kind of were around for a lot of the winning, and I'm sure that inspired you to want to be a player someday.
Yeah, I always, dreamed of playing for the Chargers. It was ever since I was a little kid, playing Pop Warner, even playing out in the yard. Everybody looked forward to going to play for the high school. And, Ansonia did have some lean years back in the late 60s and early 70s, and around 76, things start to change. And ever since 76 until recently, we've been successful. We had that one dark year in 1986 that we don't really like to talk about around here, right. But it is what it is. But ever since then, we've been on the upside.
Right. Now, a kid growing up in Ansonia, I mean, you saw a lot of great players. I know you've had some relatives that played. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Terry Golston was he's your cousin, and he was a very good player for Ansonia. But were there any players that you looked up to that you kind of idolized growing up that you said, oh, I want to be the next, Terry or whoever?
Yeah, Terry's one of my cousins. My other cousin is Howie Tinney, Jeff Bruce. I had some athletes, but, they were running backs. Jeff Bruce was a wide receiver. But when I was younger in Pop Warner, I played fullback. And when I played fullback, the names I always remember, I was just thinking about this today. Mark Goomis was a fullback. He wore number 39 like Larry Zonka. And I always said Mark Goomis I thought would be in the NFL, but you're a little kid. You don't know. And the other fullback was Jerry Gallant.
Right.
Jerry Gallant blocked for Howie Tinney, and Goomis was, they're a couple years apart, I believe. But those fullbacks I thought I was going to be a fullback. So I really, watched them.
Right.
In Pop Warner, I was fullback. Then when I was a freshman, obviously you have a growth spurt and you get a little faster, and I end up being a running back. Right.
Now let me ask you this: how old would you say was the first time you put on a pair of pads? 10 years old? Or?
No, I was heavy. Right. As a kid, so I didn't play Pop Warner till late. I was 12.
Oh, wow.
I was 12 years old.
So probably 7th grade, somewhere around there.
Yeah. My mom didn't really want me to play. He's going to get hurt. Oh, just play basketball and play baseball. No, I want to try football. And
now let me ask you this. You said 12 years old is when you started playing. A lot of people today feel that a kid really shouldn't even start playing until they get into 6th grade, that the maturity level is not, there for that type of sport. How old, I mean, are you in agreement with that, or do you think a kid should probably start when they're 9, 10 years old?
Well, I really think they should play flag football.
Right.
And then before they learn the fundamentals, because I've watched some 8 and 10-year-olds go out on the field with equipment, and
Right.
they look like bobblehead dolls out there. The equipment seems to be too heavy for them.
Right.
Their heads are going. I think if you start off in like a flag football, like they do in Shelton, they do a great job over there.
Right. Yeah.
I think starting off like that and then eventually build up. I think, you start off putting pads on at 8 years old. Next thing
Right.
you know, you're a senior in high school. You've played 10 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Some kids get burnt out, and it's it's a physical game.
Right. I do believe, too, though, big part of Ansonia's success over the years came from Pop Warner. I mean, you have to start somewhere, and I really think those people did a great job with that Pop Warner program. I really think that, a lot of the great athletes you see, if Pop Warner wasn't there for them, Ansonia probably doesn't have the success it's enjoyed the last 40 years.
No question about it. The Pop Warner program, when I was coming up, you knew the Phipps brothers were going
Right.
to be coaching
Oh,
that
yeah.
junior midget
Yeah.
team. You knew Al and Larry Cedor were going to be there.
Yeah.
You knew Kevin Rowley at that time, him and Terry Golson and Al Sokol. They had a team. It was coaches that were going to be there for
Right.
10 or 12 years, regardless if they had kids there or not. They were there. It's a little different nowadays because a lot of kids, their parents want to coach them.
Right.
And they stay 2 years
And then they
take off,
Yeah.
or they'll try to move up with their kid. I think
Right.
little parents nowadays should let other people coach their kids because they're too many people think their kids are going to be the next Franco Harris or the next Tony Dorsett,
Right.
and in baseball the next Derek Jeter. So they coddle them. Get out of that. Let somebody else coach your kids.
Right, exactly. Now, that first year, you're kind of young to evaluate yourself after that season, but did you leave that season enjoying the game, or were you still learning it? Did you like it in the beginning, or did you dislike it?
I enjoyed it because a lot of contact. I mean, it was something new to me as a 12-year-old. You're
Right.
out there playing, and the other thing is you meet new friends. There's a lot of guys that I'm friends with till this day that I met through Pop Warner.
Right. Now, let me ask you this, and we could get into it more as we talk more about the high school, but one of the things high school football has done recently is they've put, limitations on a lot of things. I know now if you have a bye week, you're not allowed to wear any equipment. They don't want people getting hurt. They're worried about concussions, and understandably. But at the same time, I mean, I feel like the kids are more protected now with the equipment they have as to when you guys played. Do you agree with how they do this system, or do you think it's a bad idea?
Well, that could go either way, but it is what it is. The people who run our football program, they're going to do what they want to do anyway. So it's regardless of what I would think, and I think they put all this emphasis on all the concussions and stuff like
Right.
that, which is fine because that's safety. But that didn't exist when I was playing. You either you saw stars, you get back in there. Hey, you all right? You know what day it is? Yep. Where are you playing at? Nolan Field. What's the score? You tell them the score. You're all set.
Right.
Nowadays, soon as you mention concussion, then that runs into a problem. But as far as having the week off, some teams it helps.
Right.
You get to rest your players that are banged up a little bit for a week, and the following week, hey, we're going to have a week off. Get in the ice baths, rest yourself, and we'll go from there. Just be out there ready to practice.
Right.
Obviously with no pads. But
Right. So now let's get into it. I believe the 1980 season was your first year in high school. You were a
Yep.
freshman. And if I'm not mistaken, you played for a long time. Ansonia freshman coach, though at the time, I think he had only been there about 5 or 6 years. John Sponheimer, am I correct?
No, actually, he came in 70. I want to say 72,
One, maybe
72.
So
yeah.
about 10
So
years he had
but
had.
I knew of him. Him and I had a little a little discussion at one of the basketball games when I called them Spoonie. And, and I was only a 12-year-old kid at that time, and I called him Spoonie, and he really didn't appreciate that. But I understand it was a learning lesson.
Right. Now, that obviously had to be a great freshman team. I'm not mistaken. I mean, you guys, like I said, you had a lot of talent in your class. But what was the difference between going from Pop Warner to now high school? You know, there's much more demand, and you know, you're expected to win. Was it difficult the first year, or did you love it?
No, I enjoyed it. You know, you had bigger kids, faster kids, so that means you had to get better. And, I mean, the line up front, we had some big people up front, but a couple of the guys, I was a running back, and I was bigger than the fullback and our two guards.
Oh, wow.
You know, and it was really as a freshman, I was 5'10", probably about 180, 185.
Right.
And our two guards were probably 170, 175. But let me tell you, those two kids had big hearts, and they could play. Gerald Hotchkiss and Chris Schumacher. Those two kids. And, you know, we had David McDermott, Timmy Ahern, John Lawler, Andy Scott, and Glenn Antrim. Kid Timmy Ewan. Timmy Ewan was the fullback.
Yeah.
Glenn Antrim was the right halfback, and I was the left halfback.
Right.
Wow. The quarterback didn't have to do much but hand it off.
Right. Now let me ask you this. You know, going into that first year, did you guys build a bond with each other? It seemed like that class was always a close class, but did it start off right from the start? Because, I mean, you guys always seemed like you had a lot of unity with each other. Like you guys were friends, not just teammates.
Correct. We bonded really well. We got along. It was like we knew each other forever. I mean, I was able to play, even though I'm a year older than a couple of them, I played sports with them, against them, and once we got in high school and we were all in it together, we gelled really good. We gelled really fast. We had, Coach Sponheimer and Coach Calandro was the assistant at the time, and they got us going, and from there on, we were successful.
Right. So now freshman year comes to an end, and, usually, I don't know how it was back then, but I'm inclined to believe that, you start having your team meetings in January, coaches tell you what's expected of you, but you're a new guy coming in as a sophomore, and this is an established program with, like I said, a legendary coach, but also a very demanding coach. You don't seem like the type of guy I ever saw that was nervous, but were you a little frightened coming into that sophomore year?
Yes, because coming in as a sophomore, that senior and junior class coming up, there was some talent there. And I knew I had to get my act together if I was even going to have an opportunity to play as a sophomore. And fortunately, things went my way. I, worked out. That's funny. I said worked out. Yeah, I worked out and did all the conditioning, and I was able to gain a starting position on the first game of the season.
Wow. Now, I believe that 81 team, if I'm not mistaken, they lost a tough Thanksgiving game to Naugatuck that year, but for the most part, very successful team. They made the playoffs, correct?
Yeah, we made the playoffs. Naugatuck beat us 7-6, and believe it or not, I still think about that game all the time. It's not just around Thanksgiving. I think about that because there was a play where I felt that I should have intercepted the ball, and I didn't. And that was it.
Right. So now 82 season comes. Great Ansonia team. I think sometimes what gets lost in the shuffle is the 83 team was so good that people forget how good that 82 team was. But that 82 team, went, I believe, 10-1 and beat Derby twice and had to beat Derby to win the state title. Back then Ansonia was beating Derby pretty good for a lot of years, but still in all, it never gets old. It had to be a thrill to beat Derby to win your state title.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, we beat them, like you said, earlier in the year. Then, later on that year, we knew Derby was a good team.
Right.
We knew we were going to have to play them again, we went down to Trumbull, and fortunately there was a fumble for us.
Right.
That, and unfortunately for Derby, we had our lineman. I think it was Dave McCluskey picked it fumble up and ran
the way back
90-something yards for a touchdown.
I think they were going in the tie at that point, and then big run back. Derby Ansonia rivalry has always been good, and we're going to talk about it a lot when we go over this 83 team. But let me ask you this. That rivalry's kind of died down a lot over the last 20 years. I mean, I know, like, the times have changed, but does it bother you as a guy who played in that rivalry to see that it's not the same as it once was?
The intensity of it, like you said, has changed. I mean, because we've dominated that series so much over the last 10, 12 years. It's not like it used to be. I wish it was like it used to be.
Right.
I mean, you would get the fans. I mean, it was nothing to see 10,000 people at an Ansonia Derby game. All the way through the 70s, 76 when Ansonia started to get better and Derby was already having success. I mean, there's 10:30 game. I remember being there at 7 o'clock in the morning with my dad with a cup of coffee and hot chocolate.
Couldn't park if you didn't come in early.
That's right. You had to get there early, and it's just so much has changed. I mean, I'm friends with a lot of the Derby guys. I talk to them a lot. The John Dorish, the Ronnie Bartone. I stop and see him, and him and I talk for hours. And really, we don't really mention football that much. It's just we just talk about life.
Right.
And back then, though, you played Derby. I used to hang out with those guys. The week of the Derby week, you really didn't talk to them.
Right.
You played your game, and that was it. The game was over with. Then you start your relationship back up again, because later on in life, you never know. You could be working next to them.
Oh, yeah. But back then, I would say even as, late as around 95, then it started to change a little bit. The rivalry was intense where they hated each other, and that, like, if you were seen talking to an Ansonia fan, you got a lot of grief for it. Same thing, if you were talking to a Derby fan. So it's amazing how much it's changed, because both those teams, they played the teams they played on their schedule, but in the back of their mind that they were always waiting for that game.
No question about it. You knew when the season started, you looked for that 6th week in October.
Yeah.
You knew the Red Raiders were coming to town.
Christmas Eve almost.
Yeah. And they knew the Chargers were coming to town. You always marked that date and said that's going to be, make or break our season. And, let's be ready. But, you got to take care of the other games too, because what good is just beating Ansonia and you go on and lose your next 3, or what good is we beat Derby and then we lose 2 in a row? It defeats the whole purpose. So you really just can't concentrate on, you see that schedule, bam. No, you want to win your games and then be ready for Derby, because they were going to buckle it up and you guys are going to have some collisions.
Oh yeah, definitely. You definitely weren't walking out of that game not sore. That's for sure. Now the '83 season comes. You guys just came off a state championship, so the goal is simple. You want to win another state title, but you as a group of seniors, what was the ultimate goal? Like, what were there any goals that you wanted besides that? Obviously beating Naugatuck had to be a number one goal as well, correct?
Yes. Yeah, we had tough luck against Naugatuck, like you said, losing 7-6, and then, they beat us when I was a sophomore, which I didn't participate in that game because I had a broken ankle.
Right.
But Naugatuck, another team that you look forward to playing. They were going to show up and play, and we wanted to beat Naugatuck as well. That was a tough year.
Right.
That was a tough year for us.
Now, let me ask you, the 83 season begins. Do you guys have any idea this is going to be Coach McAllister's last season? Because this would, be his last year as a head coach. He decided to move on. Did you have any inkling that this was going to be it for him?
Nietzsche, not a clue.
Really?
Yeah. No one had any idea that he was going to step down.
He was very young when he stepped down. He wasn't that old at all. Maybe
46.
Yeah, maybe 43.
46 years old.
Yeah.
And nobody had a clue. Before the season, it was never mentioned. And, Coach McAllister wasn't that type of guy where before the season he's going to say, oh, this is going to be my last one. What is it? Win one for the Gipper. He
Right.
wasn't that type of guy. It was just, go out there, play your butt off, give me your effort, and, everything will take care of itself.
Talk a little bit about Coach McAllister, though. I mean, what was it like playing for him?
Coach McAllister was, great guy. You get him on that football field in between those lines, and he was a football coach. He was a father. He was a mentor. Whatever you needed, you could go and speak to Coach McAllister, about anything. But he wanted you to put your best effort, whether you're in football practice, in the classroom, or running the track. He would that old Marine in him,
right?
And he was a tough coach, but that was his job. His name is signed on everything when it comes to Ansonia football, and that's what led him to that legendary career he had.
Right, exactly. Now, coming into this season, like I said, did you put a lot of pressure on yourselves because you're coming into a season where Ansonia has won 5 state titles in their history, and like I said, they've established themselves as one of the premier teams in high school football, one of the premier programs, and winning is expected. So, I mean, how much pressure did you yourself put on, winning?
We talked about it as seniors. We wanted to leave the same way we came in. When we came in, we ran the table and won all 9 games, I think it was, when I was a freshman year.
Right.
Our sophomore year, we lost that one game to Naugatuck, but we won a state championship. Our junior year, we won a state championship, but we lost that game to Naugatuck.
Yeah.
Our senior year coming in, I mean, I thought we had the capabilities of winning the state championship. There were some games, we had to get through. We had to, Derby.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Leading up to Derby, Derby gave you a run for your money that year, but were there any teams before the Derby game that you guys had? I mean, I think you guys beat Shelton pretty good, if I'm not mistaken.
We beat Holy Cross was tough for a while. We beat Shelton, and I believe we played Torrington. I don't know if that was before or after Derby, but Torrington had they were a good team. Very, I think they were undefeated going into that game as well.
Right.
And we had to go up there to the park up there in Torrington, and that was a tough match on a Friday night.
Right.
We were undefeated. Nobody scored on us.
Right.
And we wanted to keep that going. And, they had a lot to say before the game as we were going out. There's a couple fisticuffs in the stands before the game started because they thought they were going to kick our butts. And fortunately, we went up there and, we took care of business.
Right.
We had a really good defense. We played good. We had some John Hunt, who was a junior at the time. He was one of our defensive ends, and Torrington used to run that veer.
Yeah.
And, it was interesting up there. I think we beat them 28-14. They were the first team to score on us.
Right.
So,
you know what I can never get over is the fact that you guys, the success that Ansonia had over Shelton for, I think, in the 60 years, maybe they played 55 years, but I think Ansonia only lost 10 times to Shelton and won about 50 games against them. I mean, I'm sorry to say, I don't care, if Shelton didn't have great teams back then, but they've had some great teams. And for any small Class S school to beat a double L school like that on a consistent basis, that's just an unbelievable accomplishment in my book.
Yeah, Shelton, they had some tough luck against us. I happen to be friends with, we both are, with Jimmy Queen, who happened to be the quarterback at Shelton. And he just said they would get to the game, they would be pumped up and psyched. And he said some of the players, as soon as they saw that Ansonia on the front of the jerseys, a lot of guys just went, up, here they come again.
Right.
And, our closest game, that was when I was a sophomore. That's the game I broke my ankle. We beat them, I think it was 19-13.
Right.
And that was the closest game we had. When I was a junior, we beat them 42-0, and when I was a senior, we beat them 42-0. And we just had their number. That's
Right.
the only thing I could say. And they happened, over the last 20 times that we played them, they were like 1-19 against us.
Wow, that's crazy.
I know they beat us, and I remember the game down at Lafayette Field in 1974, and it was raining down there, and that was the last that they beat us.
Until
1980.
Right.
That was the dark year I was talking to you about that we don't like to mention.
Right. So now let's get into, I alluded to the Derby game. This Derby game, I'm going to bring up a good friend of ours as well, who's, as we know, he's a character, and that's an understatement, is Ronnie Leno. Mm-hmm. And Ronnie Leno always tells me the story that they were just constantly barking at you guys the whole game, taking cheap shots, because he said to play with a team like that, that's what they had to do. But did you go into that? I know you went into that game thinking it's not going to be easy because it's Derby, but they almost pulled off the upset that day. They were 2-3, and you guys were 5-0. How worried were you at the half of that game?
Well, I'll tell you, I watched them play Seymour the week before, and Seymour took it to him pretty good.
Right. That was a good Seymour team.
Yeah, that was a good Seymour team. And we had beaten Seymour, I believe, in a scrimmage. So, it was like, okay, Derby's coming. It's a rivalry, but we got this. But, you always, those rival games, you can't take anybody lightly. And I thought we took Derby lightly.
Right.
Yeah, I thought we took them lightly. But, like you said, they were, throwing a little jabs at us, something a little extra here and there. But, it was a good game. On a personal level, I thought I didn't play that well. I mean, I
believe
dropped,
you had 2 touchdowns that game.
Yeah, there's, the 2 touchdowns were fine, but I had a fumble before the half where I tried to make a big play and go to catch a ball, and Jeff Rice laid the wood to me.
He was a
and I
great
fumbled
player.
the ball.
Yeah.
And when I got back to the huddle, regardless I was a senior or not, they laid into me like there was no tomorrow. I mean, they throw bombs at me. What are you doing? It's right before the half. Stop trying to make a big play. And I knew it was my fault, but, I was figuring if I caught the ball and was able to break one tackle, I figure I'd have a shot at taking it to the house. But, unfortunately, and then they go in and score. And as I'm walking off at halftime, Coach McAllister ripped into me like there was no tomorrow, which, it was well-deserved, but, you got to play the second half. And Glenn Antrim made a couple great catches, and we were able to go on to win that game. I think it was 19-13.
Right. It was a dogfight, no doubt about it.
Yeah, it was a dogfight, and I could made a play on Ronnie Leno. He went to catch a screen pass, and I tackled him into the backfield, and I just looked at him. I didn't say anything because, Ronnie was chirping a little bit during the game because he was a tough kid. They had Jeff Rice. I think Jeff Rice carried the ball 42 times.
Yeah. It was great.
Was
Rice had a great game that game. Yeah,
he was a load and a half, and we made some mistakes. Like I told you, I fumbled the ball. I dropped one ball in the end zone. The sun was in my eyes, but you know what? That's no excuse. If you touch it, you should catch it.
Right. So you guys come out of that game with a win. I don't care. It's a big win, whether it's close or not.
Yep.
You go into the Naugatuck game. This is the one team that is basically had your number. You guys come out there that day, and that game wasn't that close, if I remember. I could be wrong, but you guys pretty much took it to them that day.
Yeah, we had, I think we beat them, Mike, was 20, I want to say 28-14 or 35-14, whatever it was. But, they were a tough team, coming in Thanksgiving Day, going up there. It was an overcast Sunday. The field was muddy. It was a mess up there. And, that played into their hands. But you know what? The way we run the ball, it played into our hands because we had a sophomore quarterback, Jeffrey Coppola. He
Very
made
good player.
Yeah, I remember one of the particular plays we were running. It was 34 option, and he took the ball and he made a fake pitch to me, and they came to me and they thought I had the ball, and Jeff was gone. I said to the guy, listen, you're tackling me for nothing because the quarterback is gone. And he just threw me to the ground, and Coppola was going for a touchdown. But that team, they had some, big players. They were big and physical.
They were very well coached.
Very well coached. You know, Coach Peters did a great job. But, me and my mouth got me in trouble during that week. Naugatuck was playing Ansonia freshmen, and they had a big fullback named Bruce Harper. He was a big bruising fullback. He was probably about 6'2", 6'3", 225, and he comes walking by us during the game, the freshman game, and I looked at our players. I go, psst. He's not that big. We'll take care of him. And Coach McAllister heard me, and I had to hear it from him. Keep your mouth shut and, play the game. You still got to play the game. But we went up there, and we were able to, take care of business. They were tough. It wasn't one of our better games, but, we lucked out. I was, able to pick the interception off and bring it in for a touchdown to put us up, I believe, 3 scores going in the middle of the fourth quarter. Right. So after that, I knew we were winning that game. But Coach McAllister he made a little sign that said it said something about all I want to do is win this game, and I think he put a score up, whatever it was. But he wanted that game just as bad because Naugatuck, they had our number for quite a few years. They were able to catch us.
How relieved were you after that game? I mean, you got a lot of times too. What ends up happening is that becomes the state championship game because a lot of times you guys would have such a hard-fought game against them that by the time you played the state title game, you guys pretty much rolled your opponent. So, I mean, how pumped up were you guys after that game?
We were pumped up, because not only that, going into that game, we were, I believe, the number 2 team in the state. So we figured we won that game. We have an outside shot at finishing number 1.
Right.
It may not happen, but you know what? The chips fall where they may, and fortunate enough, you'll probably get into that. But that Naugatuck game, when we won that game, after the game, he goes, "Hey guys, we got a shot."
Right.
We got a shot.
So now the state title game, and if I'm not mistaken, was it Stanford Catholic? Who'd you guys play?
Yeah,
against? Stanford Catholic, and pretty much you guys did what you wanted to do. You guys win the game. I think it was pretty much decided by the half. Am I correct? I mean,
it was 30. The final score was 32-0.
Right.
Mike, but that game, it's funny. In the morning, the field was full of snow.
Yeah.
Actually, Jack was on his way going hunting, and he thought the game wasn't going to be played. And that morning, Coach McAllister and Coach Sponheimer and I think Coach Lisi went down to Trumbull that morning to take a look at the field, and it was covered with snow. But they said, we're going to play. So Jack was driving by the field, and I don't know, somebody saw him and said the game is on. He had to bring his dog back home.
Oh, man.
Put his rifle away, and instead of hunting, we had to, go to Trumbull, and that was a tough game. Trinity Catholic, coming out of the FCAC.
Yeah.
They play all those double L schools, and how great they are down there. They had 6 Division I players on their team. Right. And, we had, just the average Joes that went out there and worked hard, and we took it to them.
Right. And, you guys, at the end of the day, you guys get the number 1 ranking. It's the first time in history. How big was that? Because, like I said, you guys didn't know Coach McAllister was leaving, but what a way to send him out, winning the MVL title, winning the Class S title, and then being ranked number 1 in the state. You can't do any better than that. No,
leading up to that, we knew the night before, East Catholic was playing Hand for the state championship game on a Friday night, and we have gotten word that East Catholic beat Hand. The NVL officials were doing that game. So I guess we lucked out there. But, Hand lost. We were all at the KO Club sitting there with Willis Green. Yeah. And word came back. Hand got beat. Now it's up to you guys to go out there and do it. And Saturday morning, we were there nice and early, and I just looked around at our players, and I said, nobody's beating us today. Right. Nobody. Right. The kids, everybody was focused, from the head coach down to the last player to our water boys. You couldn't hear a sound in that locker room. There was a lot of excitement in in our minds, this could happen. If we win this game, we're going to be the first team in Ansonia history to be the number one team in the state. And, fortunately, hand got beat. We went out there and we beat Stanford Catholic. I think it was 32-0.
Right.
And the celebration began.
Wow. And that's like I said, you can't ask for a perfect way to go out. You want to, you'd like to go undefeated every year, but if you had to pick one, it would be your senior year, the last time. I mean, so many great players on that team. Like I mentioned, Johnny Lawler, David McDermott, Jeff Capola as a sophomore. John Hunt was very big as a
Bill
sophomore.
Smith, Derek Abbott's. We had a lot of juniors on that team as well, and it was a great way for Coach Mack to go out. We had no idea he was going to retire until, was it 4 days later? He called everybody into the room.
Wow.
And he just said, guys, I'm stepping down. And the tears were flowing and the sobbing began.
I guess, though, for you as a senior, though, you had to be relieved that he stayed for your last year, because it probably had to be tough for the juniors and sophomores who had gotten to, know him and have him as a coach. That had to be tough to see him walk, leave at that point.
Yep, but, the good thing is, we hire within ourselves.
Right.
And Coach Lisi happened to be waiting in the wings there, and fortunate enough, he took over, and it continued.
Right.
The winning continued. I mean, I think we won, 4 in a row, maybe 5 in a row. I won as a sophomore, junior, senior.
And then 84,
and then they beat Putnam.
Yeah, and then 85, I think Derby won.
Derby won.
Yeah, but there was a long stretch for Anson.
We had a really good run at it, and, we had that dark year, and then, Jack came back.
Yeah,
and we were, so to speak, we were back in the hunt.
Right. Now, let me ask you this. Glennie Antrim, you're a kid, like you said, you always thought people could go to the NFL, but as you're a junior and senior in high school, did you ever think that this kid could play on Sunday some days? Someday?
I happen to be good friends with Glenn Antrim, and I thought Glenn Antrim was probably one of the best athletes that I ever played with.
Right.
Ever. He could run, he could throw, he could catch. He was a tremendous baseball player. I truly believe my senior year, if Glenn Antrim, he cut his finger.
Right.
And he ended up getting like 7 or 10 stitches in his finger, and that kept him out. If Glenn Antrim does not get injured, we would have won a baseball state championship. Wow. I truly believe that. That's the kind of impact he had on the team, whether it was his leadership, just showing up, or just playing. And he could run like a deer.
Right.
He could run like a deer, and I think he's probably one of the best all-around athletes I played with.
Right.
And as far as him, he works hard. He had good speed. I happened to play in a softball tournament against some of the New England Patriots at that time, and the season ended. So, I'm playing in a softball tournament with some of the Patriots, and I asked them about Glenn Antrim. And they're like, Glenn Antrim? Yeah. And they thought that Glenn got a raw deal.
Really?
They thought Glenn should have been playing on Sundays consistently on the team, not on the
taxi squad.
Yeah, taxi squad. I mean, he got an opportunity to
he played
a
few NFL games. Yeah.
He got a call up, but they felt that Glenn should have got a contract and played. He was that good.
Right.
Yep.
Now, you went on to coach several years after your high school career ended. You actually were a coach during the dark year. Mm-hmm. But let me ask you this. All the coaching you've done over the years, you've seen Ansonia win so much. You've celebrated so many championships. What did it mean to you as a player, though? Could it compare? It had to be just the best time of your life.
Yes, I loved playing, but I love coaching, and you're making more of an impact on the kids' lives when you're coaching, whether it's on the field and off the field. You have so many conversations, and you talk to them about schoolwork, make sure you get an education and get the the schoolwork done, and listen to me. The Coach McAllister, I just ran into him last week, and he was talking to my daughter about, going to school, get a good education. I said to him, Coach Mack, you were saying the same thing to me 33 years ago. I said, God, I wish I would listen. I said, boy, was I hard-headed and thick-headed, huh? And, my daughters start to laugh. But, you have such an impact on the kids when you're coaching. They talk to you about a lot of things and, tell you some things that, you don't confide in others, which is fine, and you keep it to yourself. But, you have an impact. And I have some kids to this day, and they're, 37, 38. They still call me Coach Earl.
Right. It's got to feel
Coach
good
Earl.
there.
Yeah, and I laugh. I was like, he goes, you'll always be Coach Earl to me. Even when, hey, Coach Earl this,
right.
Coach Earl that, which is, it feels good. But, I think being a coach is really good. Since you can't play anymore and you want to be around it, the next best thing is to coach. Be around the kids, have an impact on the kids. And that's what I believe 99% of the coaches or 100% of them do it, because sure don't do it for the pay.
Right. Now, let me ask you this. You're still coaching with the program.
Mm-hmm.
When the time comes for guys like Spoonie and Bobby Lisi, Kevin Rowley, whoever else, time comes for them to step aside. Will you leave with them, or do you think you'll still be involved in some capacity?
The way Spoonie's been there 44 years. They may have to dig him off the field to get him out of there. And, Lisi's been there 40-something years.
Right.
Kevin Rowley's working on, I think, 30, 31 years. This will be my 22nd year, which if I didn't, take that second shift job that I had, I probably would still be there.
Right.
But I've been saying the last couple years, I'm going to stay. I wanted to stay till we get number 20.
Right.
But I said this is probably going to be my last year.
So this is it?
Yeah, I like coaching with the freshmen. I'm
Right.
down with the freshmen. Last year I did the freshmen. This year I'm, with the freshmen. But, I'll be around, who knows?
It's a big commitment, and it's a lot of work, and, as you get older, working and doing that, it's not easy to juggle. So, it's definitely understandable. Before we go, ask you a couple of people who have probably made a huge impact in your life. Obviously, we talked about McAllister, but just explain to me what Jack Hunt, John Sponheimer, and I would say that Bubba Green made an impact as well. What would you say about those three?
Jack was the best. Him and I, we had a great relationship. We had our ups and downs during our relationship, but we always mend things back together quickly. He brought me into the program, you
Right.
know. I got hired, like you said, that dark year. He wanted to come back to coach, and I opened up my mouth and said something to the right people, and Jack was back. I was part of that, and he, off the field, him and I would, we go out to dinner a lot.
Right.
I'd go over his house for dinner, like you said. We had sit up there and eat $90 worth of Chinese food.
Yeah.
Jack, his wife Denise, and myself, watching LSU on a Saturday night, and he had a big impact on me coaching. John Sponheimer, Spoonie, the same thing. I started off as a freshman coach with him back in 1986, that dark year. Him and I spent a lot of time together there. It was just the two of us after the games, having our milkshakes after the games. And he taught me a lot. I always say he is the brains behind this operation.
Right.
And, I met Willis Green as a freshman. Everybody goes to the KO Club. You join the KO Club. You pay your one-time fee every year. You got to sell $20 worth of tickets.
Right.
And that was your fee for the year. But that was a home away from home.
Oh, yeah.
You go up to
that club.
You go up to that club. You knew you were going to get fed. You were going to work out, and you were going to get disciplined. There was no swearing, no talking about mothers, no talking about fathers, no horseplay. You could a little bit of horseplay, but Bubba Green did not tolerate a lot of stuff, and he would cook for everybody. He would have sliced roast beef. He would fry chicken, whatever, turkey, whatever he had up there. He would make enough for every person to come in there if they wanted a sandwich or grab some chicken nuggets and eat. and you were all set. And you would go there on Friday, Saturday, and Sundays. You made your way to the club.
Right.
And boy, these kids, they don't know what they're missing. Because Bubba Green didn't have any kids of his own, but you know what? He has 1,000 of them on that Ansonia football team.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
1,000 of them, because if you played football, Bubba was like your dad.
Exactly. Well, you know, Earl, it's been a pleasure talking to you. It was a lot of fun, and, you know, we could keep going. But I just want to say that 83 team, to me, they set the table for future championships at Ansonia, because you had to get over that hump of being number one. It had never been done before. And what you guys did was a tremendous accomplishment. There's been several great Ansonia teams. Some will argue a lot, you know, there's been teams better than that one. But to me, that was an all-star team, an all-star cast, and it's very hard for me to put any team next to it. That's how good it was. And I thank you again for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
And this is Mike Cannici for Valley Sports Rewind saying goodbye, everyone.